weapons. A UN report on last month's alleged chemical weapons attack in Damascus back in August 21st is being presented to the Security Council now. Well, separately, a UN war crimes team says it is investigating 14 suspected chemical attacks in the country. Well, in a moment, we hope to be going to New York to get the latest from the UN Security Council there, and also hopefully the latest from our Middle East editor who's on the ground in Syria. Before that, though, let's talk to Baria Alamuddin from Al-Quds newspaper, because it was interesting today. John Kerry, Baria.
Actually, Tim, it's Al Hayat newspaper.
Al Hayat, I'm terribly sorry. We'll make sure that's changed. But it's interesting because John Kerry today, talking to the foreign ministers from Britain, France and the French president, but having lunch now with the Saudi Arabian foreign minister, who are against this plan fundamentally, aren't they? Just explain why.
Well, actually, it's not only Saudi Arabia that's against this plan. It's the lack of confidence in Assad, isn't it, basically? It's the way that Assad regime has conducted itself, killing its people, destroying the country at large, and not being somebody you can trust. So I don't think it's a secret that Saudi Arabia and Qatar and all the Gulf countries, all the Arab countries at large, do not support the Assad regime when it's killing its people.
But it goes wider than that, doesn't it, as well? I mean, yes. You're looking in terms of the regional and the power play there as well. They will be crossed, will they not, or concerned that this is being sidetracked by Russia and may change the influence they might have had over Washington further down the line when it comes to issues like Iran, for example.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I think also we all know that the power play between Iran and Saudi Arabia is very much being played on the ground in Syria. We all know that Iran has not only a role in Syria, but it has people on the ground. They are actually conducting, as we speak, the war in Syria together with Hezbollah. And this is a well-established fact. So the Saudis don't have people on the ground, but they have influence. They are supporting the rebels. They are supporting the Free Syrian Army, and they're giving a lot of money. They're giving a lot of arms, as much as I can, because any arms the Saudis have, and I asked this an official Saudi, and I said, why don't you give them all the arms you get from the States? They said they can't because they have agreements with the countries they sell them, like the Americans or the Brits, that they cannot forward these arms to somebody. Nevertheless, there is the market at large in the world that they are buying weapons from. Nevertheless, let me tell you, Saudi Arabia is always seen to be the heart of the Sunni heartland, like Iran is the Shia heartland. But there is a difference. The Saudis are Arabs. The Iranians are Persians, so there is a difference when it comes to play.
But there is a link, is there not, you know, between those Sunni hardline groups and Al-Qaeda? One report out today in this country is suggesting that maybe half the rebels are linked to some sort of jihadist or hardline Islamist groups. What sort of control, if any, does Saudi Arabia have over them now?
Yeah, let me tell you, Tim, these reports, and they have been coming more forward the last few days, and I've been told by many people that the Syrian regime is actually increasing its participation with PR companies, etc. Mr. Kerry himself, when he spoke to Congress only 2 weeks ago or 10 days ago, he said that we do not suspect more than 10 to 15% of the fighters on the ground to be either Qaeda affiliated or Al-Qaeda. So this is highly exaggerated. Actually, an American politician told me that they do not reckon that these people are more than 8,000 to 10,000 people. Maybe they are more, maybe they are less. But the majority of the Syrians are the fighters. We see it on YouTube, we see it on Fatah. Also, we know from our people on the ground that the majority of the fighters are actually Syrian and the Syrian people. This is not, you know what is so bad about this agreement, and as you rightly said, Saud Faisal must be telling Kerry, this is not a game that we are ready to accept, because it's not only about the chemical weapons. Of course, the chemical weapons has two sides to it. It's the death, but also it's the moral story. What are we sending messages to Iran or to North Korea? And of course, Saud Faisal will be telling him, this is not sustainable. We cannot sustain the number of deaths and destruction in Syria for a long time.
So we know about the relationship between Saudi Arabia and Washington. What about the relationship between Saudi Arabia and Moscow? Because there have been some reports that there was a high-level meeting between Saudi Arabia and Moscow, suggesting that if they gave their support for the Saudi plan vis-à-vis what was happening in Syria, they could control some of the extremist threat against the Sochi Winter Olympics, for example, next year. I mean, have you been able to confirm that?
Yes.
Because that is an extraordinary deal.
No, we haven't been able to confirm it. It's difficult to confirm it because you have to have people sitting there. But there have been reports, and I'm sure Prince Bandar has been very persuasive when he went to Russia. The Russians have been showing some signs of change, but every time we say there is some signs of change, we are always wrong, because they seem to be the only ones sticking to Assad, while on the other hand, we see the Europeans and the Americans are not actually sticking by the rebels. That is why in the Arab world at large, in Saudi Arabia, in the Gulf, and other Arab states, the people themselves, let alone the politicians, do not really trust anymore what Mr. Haig is saying or what Mr. Kerry is saying. They see this as a sign of weakness now. So
the Saudis reportedly pouring more arms into Syria in the expectation of those military strikes.
Yes.
What sort of discussion is going on, do you think, between Saudi Arabia and America now, though, in terms of pressure to actually fulfill that sort of threat that there will be punitive strikes if Damascus refuses to budge even a millimetre on what has been agreed?
We all know, Tim, that Saudi Arabia is an amazing trade partner. We all know the influence it has also in the Islamic world at large. So it has a lot of money. It controls the oil. Every time the price of oil goes up, Saudi Arabia is always obliging and providing the oil and providing lower prices. So Saudi Arabia has leverage in many, many ways. So I'm positive that the Americans will be listening. It's also a very old ally. But if you ask me today that Saudi Faisal is actually enjoying lunch with Kerry, I would say no. I think he must be pressuring Kerry. He must be telling him this is not acceptable and something has to be done, because more killing is happening as we speak. The onslaught after what happened in Geneva and the agreement between Kerry and Lavrov, we have seen that the government forces have increased their onslaught on all areas of Syria, and more people are dying. Also, the number of refugees, the number of people that have no schools, the number of people that have no homes. Do not forget, I mean, we in Lebanon, for example, and I've been told this by Walid al-Muallim, the foreign minister of Syria. He told me there is 30% or more marriages between the Lebanese and the Syrians. There is maybe not less between the Syrians and the Saudis or the Jordanians. This is an open country. This is one. These are all Arabs. These are all Muslims. There would be relations. And we are hearing also reports of recruits coming from Kuwait, coming from Iraq. You know, it's very much now becoming a Sunni-Shia divide, which is already in the area.
Exactly. All right. Well, Baria, thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Baria
from Al Hayat, not from Al Quds. Thank you very much indeed. Stay with us here on Global. We'll be bringing